Happy Monday.
Yay! Hi, it's Monday, friends. Journeyers, it's Monday. You know what it is. It's me and Emily.
Yay! Let's party.
Let's party for sure. My goodness. How are you, Emily? How are you? What's going on?
I'm doing all right. My baby's 4 months. He's crushing it, laughing. Found his toes yesterday. You know.
Found his toes.
Yeah.
Oh, can you tell us about finding your toes, please?
He reached out and grabbed his toes and was like, "Whoa, I
This
didn't
is
know I
so.
had these."
Oh, I like
Very
when
funny.
you see these things happening, when you see just like little tiny milestones like that. Is it just tell us about
It's
it.
so
Just tell us what that
wild.
feels
It's
like.
so wild to know, like I guess, like, so we all understand on some level that, like, at some point we knew nothing, uh but it's so wild to actually see that happen. And he still doesn't
Oh.
have, like, great control of his hands.
Mm-hmm.
um we were very frustrated today on the playmat while he was like trying to like reach at something, but I don't think he has his depth perception yet, so he was just kind of
Oh, interesting.
like it was here and he was just kind of like going like this. uh
It's like he's doing his ever loving best.
He's just trying so hard. And so it is just fascinating to be like, oh, I guess
Mm.
we all had to learn that at some point, huh? Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to use this as a segue. So basically, we're learning and we're experimenting.
We sure are.
Ben is experimenting with his toes. And here, can you change in the middle of an experiment? Is there value in
Ooh.
seeing something through all the way through, even if it's uncomfortable?
Oh, nice. I That is a very good question. And like uh
Mhm.
my strict science brain is like, well, you you can show that your hypothesis was wrong and that's okay. Uh
Yeah, tell us about your strict science brain. Let's start there.
yeah,
We're gonna get into the improv part. All right, don't freak out. We'll get into the improv part, people, journeyers. But yeah, what is your strict
well, if you're
science
doing
brain
if you're
think?
doing an experiment, right? Any
Mhm.
kind, like, when we say experiment, I want us to go back to like what we traditionally stereotypically think of an experiment, right? Like
Mhm.
you got your lab coats, you're in your with your beakers or whatever. And
Makers.
if you're doing something, if you're like, I bet if I mix these colors, they'll become green.
Mhm.
Very simple hypothesis. And you start to mix them and you're like, oh no, they're turning purple. If you bailed then on your whole thing, you know, you wouldn't have really given it a shot and seen it the whole way through, because in that instance what you want to do is find out like what really really happens. And if you're like science brainy, just because something is not going the way your hypothesis wants or the way you like thought it would go, uh you shouldn't bail. There's still value in the like, oh well, now we know that when they didn't turn green because this liquid was extra hot and that makes it
Right.
purple.
Right.
Um, but I do think there's a different discussion to be had when we're talking about like certain life experiments,
There it
right?
is. Yeah, absolutely. That's the big thing, right? Because when depending on what you're experimenting with, and so here's where we can sort of backtrack and get on the stage, on and off the stage. We can get on the stage here and talk about being in uncomfortable situations or being in any situation that you want to change on stage, and that you're like, maybe I'm trying this thing and it's not going, my partner isn't going in the direction that I thought they would go, and now we're like tunneling together. And now right this second that I'm thinking about it, one of the huge differences is that you have a partner, you have somebody to see, okay, I have this hypothesis about if I scene paint this way, what will happen in our scene. And if you are looking at your partner's like, I'm doing this, I'm going down the Little Red Riding Hood trail. And you're like, no, that's not, abort. I'm like, no, stop. I think in that case, sure. It's interesting to pull back. You can sort of stop midway. You have a choice. You have a choice to discover what this setup can do. But when we talk about just experimenting for ourselves when no one else is involved, it seems I'm leaning toward this scientific method
Mhm.
that you're talking about, where we're off stage and we're like, I want to see what happens if I braid my hair. Like, I want to see what happens if I braid my hair.
Mhm.
And then maybe in the middle of it, it's not necessarily looking the way I thought it was going to look, but it's different and it's interesting. It feels like I should finish out that experiment.
I think depends on the weight that you're putting on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If if you're like, I just want to see if I can braid my hair, uh, that's one thing. If you're like, I know I'm capable of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see, I just kind of want to like see what it's like to wear it for a day. I think I think it depends on like what the expectations you set yourself beforehand,
Yeah.
because that also that sets the parameters of your experiment anyway, right? I see Charlotte's in the chat. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi,
If you're here
Charlotte.
hanging out with us, go ahead and put a hello in the chat, and also drop us like maybe something you've been experimenting with lately that might have
Yeah.
felt a little uncomfortable,
How's it
right?
going? Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a lot of welcome to the segment of Emily talks about parenting again. Uh,
We like this segment.
they're thinking about a kind of a personal experiment that also does affect other humans. A lot of people talk about like breastfeeding or formula feeding, right, with
Mm.
little babies. And I think there is some experimentation in terms of what works for you and your family. And what I think is important to think about when I'm talking about the weight that you put on it, right? Um, when my little guy was born, I put the weight on like all I care about is that he's fed, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna try exclusively doing it this way, and if it doesn't work, that's fine. I get the experiment was, can I try it? Can we do it? And what I learned was we need to combo. And that's okay. I got that data point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Charlotte says they've been experimenting with asking for what they need. Ah, it's so hard, but it's worth it. You're
Mm-hmm.
right. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think like Charlotte, like the experimenting for asking for what you need is important. So you might not want to bail super
Right.
early. You might want to
Mm-hmm.
like give it a shot and see what happens.
Yeah. This is the other side of that coin. Charlotte is talking about. My aunt always told me that sometimes it's better to cut your losses, but I'm always the person who grinds through things no matter what. Yeah, it's there's this there's a balance. I like you were talking about what is good for the family, right? What
Mhm.
is good if formula versus breastfeeding? What's good for me? What's good for the baby? What's good for my partner? What's good for just the family, the
Mhm.
environment in which we are living? And that's not only based on breasts or formula, like those two things. It might be
There's a
based on
lot of things.
timing and, yeah, exactly, so many things that go into making that to making those decisions of whether to push through or to stop in the middle.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think with with improv, it's less of a this is what we do all the time, and more of a learning to accept that it's okay to do one or the other,
Hmm.
right? We can really feel shame when we are thinking about, okay, or telling people, there's a thing I'm going to do. I'm going to breastfeed. I'm going to breastfeed. And then somewhere in the middle of that experiment, it's not the thing that you can do. I think that there is shame. I'm going to be a blank. My career is going to be Broadway. My career is going to be banker, whatever I'm going to be a runner, whatever it is. And somewhere in there, either it's not for you, you don't like it, and there's like a shame, there's a feeling of shame that uh, you go through when we stop in the middle. And I think, if anything, improv helps us to practice being okay with just abandoning. You
Hmm.
know what, edit that scene, and then people rising up to support that shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, I shouldn't say abandon, I should say shift.
Yeah. I think there's a difference between, I think this is it. There's a difference between experimentation and expectations,
Oh
right?
yes,
And
yes.
a lot of when we say, and Charlotte's commenting in the chat about how, um, sometimes some people think we have to do improv the right way, uh,
Hmm.
but also saying that like we don't really have rules, right? When we think
Right,
about rules, rules are like the expectations that we put upon ourselves or upon other people, right?
right.
And experimentation is like the opposite of that. If you're truly experimenting, then you don't really have any like you have a hypothesis, you think you know what's going to happen, but you don't know, and you're not like tied to it. You're not married to the outcome, right? Exactly, tied to the outcome. Uh-huh.
Right.
Um, and so without and so I think that helps if you're going into something like I would like to try this thing rather than like I'm going to be this and I'm going to do this.
We call you journeyers because that's what you're on, right?
Mhm.
We're all on this journey when we're creating on stage. uh, we don't know, because we're creating with other people, we don't know what the outcome is going to be, we don't know where we're going to end up. And so it's okay to create together in the moment. And if you're feeling suddenly like, I feel like I can see an outcome and I don't like the outcome that is coming, then we can shift and move.
Mhm.
And I think we get one, not only do we get to practice being supported when we shift, but we also get to practice shifting on the fly, right? Like, and not, like you said, not being tied to the, not only not being tied to the outcome, but not being tied to the previous choice that you made, right? You made
Mhm.
this choice and suddenly it feels like, oh, I made that choice. I really need to just like hold on to the choice. I have to commit to that choice. I do talk about committing a lot. I really enjoy committing,
But it
but
depends. It's
not to the
situational.
detriment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And there's also, when we're talking about bailing when something's uncomfortable or we don't like it, there's also a discussion to be had about how much do we sit into that discomfort before
Mhm.
bailing on something, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
because a little bit of discomfort's great, but like pain isn't, or hurting other people, or like just finding something is just not for you is
Right.
not great. But feeling a little bit uncomfortable is how we grow. So I think there's
Yeah.
also a little bit of a discussion um, there. And I think that goes back to the weight that we place on it, right? That like if it's a little bit uncomfortable, if the water's turning purple, but the weight that you're putting on it is like, but I gotta see this through, man, uh, because figuring out what happens at the end is important to me.
Right.
Um, then we stick with it. Uh,
Yeah. That can be so icky.
mhm,
Ugh.
mhm, mhm,
Because even with the tools, even with these learned values and tools about making decisions on the fly. It's okay. It's okay to make these decisions. It's okay to change. It's okay that someone is supporting you. Being in it and sitting with, okay, I really need to see this through. I really need to see this water turn purple. Like, just to, on the other end, on the other side, just to have the journey behind me so I can know, well, what did I do? What did I learn? What did I do to make it turn purple? Do I want to
Hmm.
do that again? Maybe I like the purple. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I mean, think about like there are so many things that have been invented because they were not what people wanted, right? Like wasn't something like Play-Doh was supposed to be some sort of sticky thing, or silly putty, I think was supposed to be some sort of like wall
Oh
stick
yeah, like
something. Yeah.
spackling or something.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
And so they experimented with this formula and they were like, oh, it's not right for that, but we can use this for something else.
Yes. Yeah.
And
That is
and
so
penicillin, that's yeah, Charlotte, exactly. Like all these things where it's like, oh no, my mold experiment went wrong, but wait, this mold can cure things.
yeah. We it's important. It's important sometimes to sit through that because you don't know what change is going to affect you positively, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes we're in the water turning purple, right? We're in the change, or we're in the change, in the making of a decision, and it feels uncomfortable, or the experimentation, and it feels uncomfortable, and we back out of complete fear, right?
Mhm.
Out of complete fear that we might, and this, we talked a little bit about this some weeks ago, but that we might not be able to get back to where we started out, right? It's like, well, I'm trying this thing. This water's turning purple. Oh, I can't. I'm just going to quit it because I don't want to be able to I want to be able to return to clear water, or I want to be able to turn to pink water, or whatever it was that you started out with.
Mhm.
But if we don't follow through, we may not know that the purple water was always better, or that the purple water can be used for something. It can teach us something in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. I think every kind of experiment can teach us something, even if it's that we were wrong. I think
Ooh,
we
that we were
talk a
wrong.
lot about um acting in accordance to our values and what's important, right? And I think that this conversation is is highlighting the difference between acting towards your values versus acting to be happy, right? A lot of people are like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be happy with it. But not all the things that are important to us are like make us happy in the moment. And I
Right,
think sometimes that might make you feel like you're failing if you're like, this is hard and I'm not happy and I don't really like it.
right,
Um, makes you feel like maybe you made the wrong choice and makes you want to bail. But if it is something that's important to you, then and you're focused on living a value based a life striving towards your values rather than striving towards happiness, then it might help you push through a little better.
yeah. The other part that I'm getting out of that is striving towards your values versus striving to please other people.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And we see that on stage, that shows up on stage sometimes when we are either trying to please the audience or trying to please your partners, and you are doing, the way you are doing that is giving up on your values, right? You're giving up on, I really wanted to I really wanted to try this character, and now I'm sitting in the middle of this character and I'm looking around, and the the audience isn't laughing, and my partners think I'm weird. Like, that's a hard place to be. But if what you were valuing in that moment was really pushing through, really experimenting with this character, it might be better to continue with that experiment, see your character all the way through, and then look back and say, how did I feel about it? how did I feel about that? Was it fun? What did I learn? Was it exciting? I did a character. How does that feel? Versus giving up on that complete journey so that you can please your audience or your fans, not your fans, your partners. And I feel
Yeah.
like, oh, we're talking, it's like pro tips, hard stuff that we're talking about here. Because when we talk about on stage or off the stage, pleasing other people, it just feels we're like meant to think that it feels better to get the accolades from people because they liked what you did. But what
Mhm.
about what you like? Did you like what you did?
Yeah, I think I think this is also a super important conversation for improvisers who are not straight white men when we're talking about
Ooh,
pleasing our audience and not like
come on,
meeting
Emily. Come
expectations.
on. Preach it.
Well, and and I feel like where I was performing for a while, I'm in the South. We're both in the South, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Um, in and honestly, Austin's more progressive than Richmond, but like we're in fairly liberal cities, but we're still in the
Mm-hmm.
freaking South, right?
Right.
And so when we improvise, there is this conversation that and we had like in our theater about representation, like about LGBTQ representation, right? And like that's a very very specific example in my mind where we push for not really push, but like our if we're acting our truth and like being queer on stage, right?
Yes,
Uh
absolutely.
and just because there's like that little voice in your head that's like, oh, what about the like little conservative old lady that's in the back with her arms crossed and maybe she's gonna like say something and like be like, yeah, complain to the manager or whatever. And it's important, but if it's important to push through that representation, then we do it. Even
Right.
though we might be worried about not pleasing other people, we might be worried about the discomfort.
Absolutely. We talk
Our
about
whole
this
tangent.
so no, it's not. It's the best. It's like right in line, right? We've talked about this when we talk about using culture names, right? When we're
Yes.
talking about like what are the names? What are names that aren't 100% American white go to names, right? And
Mhm.
instead of using Bob and Sue, like what are the names that show up in your culture? And the reason we're talking about that in tandem or yeah, in tandem with this, like, can you change in the middle of an experiment? The experiment might be showing up as queer on stage. This is something we like people don't, oh no, okay, like making the choice to show up as queer, making the choice to use a name that is reminiscent of your culture or of a culture, and to see what that does in play. And the thing is that when we do that, we're doing something for ourselves. We're able to show up for ourselves. And when we bail on ourselves, right? When we show up as ourselves and we see like that people are uncomfortable, like, oh, what? I've never heard that name before. Or oh, you're a queer person. Do I have to be a queer? I don't know what to do. Right. And then in order to please those people or in order to make them feel comfortable, we backtrack, right? I didn't say such and such a name. I didn't say Zaria. I said Sarah. Sarah is what I said, right? Well, now I've just given up on my whole culture, myself. I've really given up on myself. And I think that it's important to note that the improv stage especially is a place where we should be practicing showing up for ourselves
Mhm.
so that we can show up for ourselves and not bail on ourselves off of stage.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Whew.
That is because that's something, again, that's something that's important to us, where we're
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
living through that value rather than living for the value rather than living for happiness and comfort. right?
Right.
Because sometimes being ourselves is uncomfortable.
It is.
I wish
Yeah.
it wasn't. It's kind of bullshit.
It's really strange. I think so this is sort of off topic, on topic. Yeah, right? We like to jump. But I'd love to talk about supporting people when you see them bailing on themselves. Like,
Ooh.
right? Because this is what this in this question, it's like, can you change in the middle of an experiment? What's the value in sitting in it? It feels like the question is saying, you're alone and you're making these choices by yourself. No one's coming to help. And what we're saying is there are people to help. And now what I want to talk about is if you're the person who's helping, how do you see somebody sort of bailing, and what do you do? How do you do it? What? Ugh.
I think there's some proactive things to do. Like we need to be mindful of cheering on people before they get to the point where they want to bail, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, is the first thing there to
Yep.
try to mitigate that problem altogether. But then finding ways to support them one way or the other. Some people might bail because they don't feel safe, right? Which is
Right.
obviously an incredibly um, important thing, right? Like if I, um, uh, as a woman, if I'm like walking through a dark parking lot and I see like some sketchy someone with like coming towards me,
Mm-hmm.
that's not the time where I'm going to be myself and be like, "Hey, fuck you." That's probably going to be a time where I scuttle to my car, right?
Right.
And I wouldn't want someone being like, "Yeah, Emily, mess him up."
No,
Uh,
get back in there, Emily.
get
Go
back
back
in
into
there.
that into that parking lot. Put up your dukes, Emily.
Yeah,
No.
so like I there's a difference between like encouraging them into like an unsafe situation, but then also being like, "Hey, I see what you're doing, and I think that's great, and I'm here to support you." Maybe like in your example with the names, um, maybe finding a way to like repeat their name back to them, like,
Mm-hmm.
"Wow, that," um, and not like in a patronizing like, "Oh, what a nice name," but like reinforcing their name by saying it again,
Mm-hmm.
um,
I think in
or
that situation, that's it,
yeah,
right?
uh-huh,
We even, and that's like on both sides. That's just like it's the same as using people's pronouns. It's the same as, oh, and that's a great example. Oh my gosh, we're ready. But when you see people, have you ever been in a situation where someone has told you their pronoun and then somebody else mispronouns them, like doesn't use the right pronoun, and no one says anything?
mhm,
Like, that's the space where you say to that person who's using the wrong pronoun, they like they, they
mhm,
like they, we'll keep it at they or whatever. That way you can tell them, like, I'm supporting you, I hear you, I support you, and I'm not letting you give up on yourself in the middle of this experiment, which is living through the world.
right, yeah, yes, the experiment of living in the world.
Somehow we got into a talk about allyship.
Yeah, for real.
For
Yeah,
real. Yeah.
and, uh, and again, remembering that, like, it's contextual, so, like, also don't be like, "Yeah!" This
Right. Get in there. No, you tell them your pronouns. You
yeah.
say what.
You're not gonna go into, like, a very conservative area and be like, "Yo, this is
This
if
is so
anyone
and
has any
so.
problems with
Their
their
pronouns
pronouns,
are
you
they.
can fight them."
Right? They like fighting. Don't you like fighting? Emily, get in there. You
You
like
like
what?
fighting, go. So, like, you know, uh, within contextual reason, like don't out your friends or put them in unsafe situations, but
Right. But
uh
yeah,
we
find
definitely should be
find
standing up for
places
them.
where you can support them.
Mhm.
On and
Off the stage. Goodbye.
bye, everybody.